We live in an era of presidents and prime ministers where authority is supposedly decided at the ballot box. Yet a massive paradox sits right at the heart of global influence. A family ruling with no army, no political mandate, wielding such astonishing global dominance from a purely ceremonial role. I am tracking the Windsors, a name echoed in every single corner of our modern world. Those faces sell magazines. Their private dramas become blockbuster television shows, while their quietest movements shift global markets and shape foreign policy. Though their official authority is strictly symbolic, their actual leverage is an entirely different beast. It remains a masterclass in soft power and strategic alliances, backed by an unimaginable fortune, centuries in the making. Our records show this is no simple tale of castles. It is a chronicle of survival, cold strategy, and the quiet, relentless accumulation of raw influence. Behold the history of how a German dynasty cleverly transformed itself into the ultimate British institution, evolving to become, arguably, the most influential royal bloodline on the entire planet. We must trace this centuries-long journey, uncovering the calculated gambles and sharp maneuvers that built the modern Windsor name. This is the true blueprint of their power. It proves that true influence is built not with laws, but through symbols, vast wealth, and a brand stronger than any modern corporation. This brings us to our central mystery. How does a family lacking any official political authority remain the most influential dynasty on Earth? Historically, it makes no sense. A flat-out contradiction in our democratic age. And yet, the record shows the British monarchy under the House of Windsor mastered a completely different kind of authority. It is a quiet power, requiring absolutely no votes, an authority operating in that foggy gray area between politics and culture. To understand their dominance, we must look past the glittering parades and examine the machinery operating silently behind palace walls. This is the documented rise of how the House of Windsor strategically engineered and defended its supreme position as the most dominant family on the globe. To truly understand the Windsor Dynasty, one historical fact must be laid bare. They should not even exist today. At least, not under this name. Their modern survival story starts not with an epic conquest, but with a clever stroke of rebranding. A sudden name change. Before they became the Windsors, their official title was the House of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha, a name signaling deep German aristocratic roots, the legacy of Queen Victoria marrying Prince Albert. For decades, this prominent German bloodline was actually a major point of pride, but by 1917, that same bloodline became a fatal flaw. World War I was raging. Britain was locked in combat with Germany, and anti-German hysteria was boiling over in the streets. Amidst that hostile atmosphere, the royal family's own German identity became a massive national embarrassment. King George V was direct first cousins with the enemy leader, Kaiser Wilhelm II. Their dynastic title of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha stood as a constant public reminder of close ties to the enemy. The absolute breaking point arrived in March 1917, when German Gotha G4 bombers began blitzing London. Let that sink in. The very bombers raining fire down on London carried the exact same name as the ruling royal family. A devastating symbolic disaster. To terrified citizens, it felt like the explosive payloads falling from the sky bore the signature of their own king. They were backed into a corner. The monarchy, meant to stand as a great symbol of national defiance, was tied directly to the hostile enemy. This went far beyond bad publicity. It was a fight for their very survival. Across Europe, historic empires were collapsing, and old monarchies were being systematically erased. The British royals knew they had to adapt or perish, and this high-stakes moment sparked the first great tactical move of the modern dynasty. King George V, usually a staunch traditionalist, chose a surprisingly radical path. On July 17, 1917, a royal decree severed all lingering ties to their ancestral German heritage. The historic name Saxe-Coburg and Gotha was instantly erased. He swapped it for a beautifully English alternative, Windsor, an absolute stroke of public relations genius. They lifted the name directly from Windsor Castle, a historic bastion of royal power. It sounded deeply ancient, comforting, and most of all, proudly British. Yet this went far beyond cosmetics. It was a complete, structural rebranding of the imperial crown. King George officially renounced every single German title belonging to himself and his immediate household. He pressured his entire extended family to follow suit, trading foreign titles for British-sounding family names. The Battenbergs became the Mountbattens. Tex transformed into the Cambridges and Athlones. With one swift stroke, the crown completely scrubbed away its alien origin. This was a loud, public declaration that the crown answered only to the citizens of Great Britain. This calculated survival strategy laid down the actual foundation of the modern House of Windsor. It forged a rule that has guided their hands ever since. To survive, you must mirror the national identity. We see their enduring playbook for power here. Do not resist a changing world. Simply pivot and rebrand, turning German aristocrats into the ultimate, timeless symbol of British identity. It was a lesson, etched forever into their dynasty. That masterful maneuver saved them, while rival royal dynasties across Europe collapsed into total obscurity. The Windsors understood that modern 20th century power was no longer just about sacred bloodlines. It was about brand. And barely 20 years later, this brand new Windsor Dynasty faced a catastrophic internal crisis. It was a profound emergency that almost shattered the entire empire. History often frames the 1936 abdication crisis as a romantic fable, a king giving up his crown for love. Yet behind that romantic veneer lay a savage, backroom power struggle. This watershed moment exposed the second, most guarded secret of the British crown. The institution itself must always eclipse any single individual. Protecting this sacred brand of duty was paramount. When King George V passed away in 1936, the crown fell to Edward VIII. Edward was charismatic, thoroughly modern, and incredibly popular. He looked like a breath of fresh air. But deep within the palace walls, anxiety was mounting. The establishment viewed him as an unpredictable loose cannon. He routinely shirked his duties, demonstrating a disturbing lack of interest in his sworn, lifelong role. Tensions finally boiled over when Edward declared his intent to marry Wallis Simpson, a twice-divorced American socialite. For both Parliament and the Church, this plan was a total non-starter. Crucially, the reigning British monarch also holds the title of Head of the Church of England. Back then, Church doctrine strictly forbade divorced individuals from remarrying if a former spouse was still living. For the sovereign to break this rule triggered an absolute constitutional and spiritual crisis. But behind closed doors, the crisis ran far deeper than Wallis Simpson. The real damage lay with Edward himself. Prime Minister Stanley Baldwin and the royal court saw a king putting his personal desires above public duty. He directly threatened the very brand of selfless service his father had built. The monarchy survived the First World War by acting as a shield of stability. Edward risked reducing the entire institution to a celebrity soap opera. Cornered by an impossible choice, Edward chose love over country. On December 11th, 1936, he abandoned the throne and announced his choice over the airwaves. He confessed he found it impossible to carry his heavy burdens without the woman he loved near him. That stunning declaration sent shockwaves rippling across the entire globe. Yet for the monarchy, this agonizing crisis became a vital moment of reinvention. The establishment ultimately chose the crown over the king. Power shifted to Edward's incredibly shy, stammering younger brother, Albert. Taking the name George VI, he deliberately projected continuity to calm a panicked public. He and his wife, Queen Elizabeth, stood as the exact opposites of Edward and Wallis. They were steady, family-centered, and completely committed to the call of duty. They became the brand. Their enduring reputation was forged in the fires of the Second World War. As German bombs rained on London during the Blitz, the royal couple refused to flee. They stayed in Buckingham Palace, visiting ruined streets and turning themselves into symbols of defiance. When bombs struck the palace itself, the Queen famously remarked, that she was glad it happened. It made her feel she could look the devastated East End straight in the face. That solidarity was priceless, as George VI successfully cemented the Windsor brand for a generation. They proved that royalty was not about hollow glamour, but silent sacrifice. A crisis starting as a complete disaster became their defining moment. It effectively purged the institution of a king who rejected the mold, replacing him with a leader who represented it perfectly. And that revealed the ultimate rule in their playbook: protect the brand at all costs. The true power of the Windsors never lay with the individual wearing the crown, but in the heavy idea that crown represented. And that idea was duty. But as the 20th century rolled on, the Windsors faced an even greater threat: the collapse of the British Empire. For centuries, royal power relied on an empire where the sun never set. But the aftermath of the Second World War changed everything. One by one, vast nations from India to Africa demanded their independence. This sudden retreat from empire should have crushed the family's massive global influence. Yet it did not, thanks to one of the most brilliant strategic pivots in modern history. The Windsors, spearheaded by a young Queen Elizabeth II, managed to transform devastating loss into a new source of power, choosing to repurpose the dying empire rather than fight it. Their ultimate secret to surviving as a global force lay in forging the brand new Commonwealth of Nations. This modern alliance was officially born from the crucial London Declaration of 1949. The immediate hurdle was India, which wanted to become a republic while remaining inside this exclusive British club. The resulting compromise was genius. The reigning monarch would no longer rule over each independent territory, but would instead stand recognized as the symbolic head of the entire Commonwealth. It was a quiet, subtle shift, yet an incredibly profound one. This transformed the Queen's role, shifting her from imperial ruler to a voluntary symbolic leader. When Elizabeth II took the throne in 1952, she dedicated her entire reign to making this model work. She knew that hard military power was a thing of the past. Instead, she would master soft power, relying on influence, diplomacy, and sheer charm. The Queen became this new Commonwealth's main champion. She embarked on legendary tours, visiting almost every country across the globe. These were no simple photo ops. They were diplomatic masterclasses. She forged deep bonds with generations of world leaders, from India's Jawaharlal Nehru to South Africa's Nelson Mandela. Floating above politics, she became a unifying figure in a way prime ministers never could. The Commonwealth gave the House of Windsor a unique global stage. Other royal dynasties, like those in the Middle East, wielded far more direct political and economic power within their borders. But the British monarch remained a uniquely global figure. By 2025, the Commonwealth had grown into a voluntary group of 56 countries, representing over 2.6 billion people, almost a third of humanity. King Charles III is the official head of state in only 15 of these nations, but leading this Commonwealth grants him an unmatched level of global reach compared to other monarchs. This empire of influence remains the secret engine behind the Windsors' enduring power. Royal tours are carefully planned to secure diplomatic ties, boost British trade, and win massive goodwill. Yet, this network of influence is facing serious challenges. Recently, nations like Barbados chose to remove the British monarch as their head of state, and Jamaica plans to hold its own referendum soon. The Crown's dark historical ties to colonialism and slavery are facing intense new scrutiny. Even so, the sheer genius of this setup lies in its flexibility. Even after becoming a republic, a country often chooses to stay in the group, still recognizing King Charles as their symbolic leader. Swapping direct rule for the Commonwealth was a brilliant survival strategy. It proves a classic Windsor move. When you lose direct control, you build a voluntary alliance held together by pure symbolism. That is how they salvage the ruins of empire, turning them into a network that sustains their power today. Because in the grand game of history, power and wealth go hand in hand. While the family's political authority is purely symbolic, their financial power is incredibly real. To truly understand their survival, we must follow the money. The royal family sits on top of a massive, complex financial empire of land, assets, and investments that makes them one of the wealthiest dynasties alive. This isn't just about luxury. It is the engine driving their global power and protecting their absolute independence. Yet few understand how this funding works. The most visible piece is the sovereign grant. Many assume it is just a taxpayer-funded salary for the king. The reality is far more complex and incredibly clever on the crown's part. The sovereign grant is actually a direct slice of the massive profits from the crown estate. For the 2025 to 2026 fiscal year, it reaches a staggering $132.1 million. So what exactly is this crown estate? This is the ultimate foundation of their wealth. Historically, the crown estate represents a colossal empire of British land and property held by the monarch in right of the crown. Yet the king cannot sell a single acre. It functions not as personal property, but as a modern corporation. The sheer scale of these holdings is staggering, swallowing prime London real estate like Regent Street, endless tracts of agricultural land, and crucially, nearly the entire British seabed itself. This vast national portfolio is valued today at over £14 billion. In the 2024 to 25 fiscal year, it generated a staggering net profit of over £1 billion for the state. In retrospect, the monarchy secured the deal of a lifetime. They surrendered control of this vast territory to Parliament back in 1760. Trading it for a fixed salary that is now a direct cut of these massive earnings. But look closer at the archives. The true source of their private wealth lies in the ancient duchies. These are two historic domains designed solely to generate private income. The Duchy of Lancaster exists entirely to fund the reigning monarch's private account, historically known as the Privy Purse. Then there is the Duchy of Cornwall, which yields a massive personal revenue for the heir apparent, the Prince of Wales. This is strictly private money. It remains an independent cash flow that shields the crown from political pressure. Beyond these grand estates lies the closely guarded personal fortune of the family. We are talking private lands like Balmoral and Sandringham, alongside a priceless royal art collection, rare historic jewels, and massive private investments. As we tally these hidden assets, the true scale of their power becomes absolutely staggering. Independent records from 2017 valued the British monarchy as a global brand at over £67 billion. Our analysis shows the institution's yearly contribution to the British economy exceeded £1.7 billion, driven by global tourism and royal branding. This immense financial foundation is the cornerstone of the Windsor strategy. It grants them a level of global influence that no other dynasty can match. It bankrolls an army of staff and preserves historic palaces while staging the grand spectacles that define British soft power. Crucially, it buys them political immunity. No matter which government takes office, the throne remains financially untouchable. This brilliant combination of public revenue, historic estates, and private wealth, coupled with a brand valued in the billions, has transformed the House of Windsor into a true global financial superpower. Yet the survival of this dynasty was never just a matter of wealth and planning. It demanded rigorous hands-on administration, sustained for generations. The principal architect of this modern empire was Queen Elizabeth II. Her 70-year tenure stands as a masterclass in institutional adaptation. Under her watch, both family and crown began operating with the strict discipline of a multinational corporation. In our historical records, we see them frequently referred to as the Firm, a title first coined by her husband, Prince Philip. That name captures the Windsor doctrine, a highly calculating, pragmatic, and entirely unsentimental operation. Their main export is national stability and tradition and historical identity. While the senior royals acted as the board, for 7 decades, the Queen was the ultimate chief executive. The true genius of the Queen lay in her understanding that modern royal power had become purely symbolic. Therefore, that symbol had to remain flawless. She carefully crafted a legacy of relentless duty, cloaked in deliberate mystery. Historically, she almost never granted interviews or voiced personal opinions. In an era of constant oversharing, that calculated restraint became her greatest strength. She understood a crucial rule. Familiarity breeds contempt, meaning the monarchy had to remain somewhat distant to keep its magic. Behind closed doors, The family firm was constantly adapting, especially with the mainstream media. This process required painful trial and error. The landmark 1953 coronation was the very first to be broadcast on television. Prince Philip pushed for the cameras, despite intense pushback from old-school courtiers, resulting in an absolute triumph. While it brought the crown into millions of living rooms, other media experiments failed miserably. To fix this, in 1969, and trust me, they immediately regretted this, they let a documentary crew film them for a year. The documentary Royal Family was a ratings smash, but the Queen soon realized it was a massive mistake. It shattered the mystique, showing the royals eating breakfast and engaging in mundane small talk. They swiftly locked it away in the archives, never to be seen again. The lesson was learned. Be visible, but never accessible, and control the narrative at all costs. Following that disaster, the royal public relations machine became tightly managed. Every public appearance was tightly controlled, relying on staged events and photo ops to project a flawless public image. They weaponized the press's hunger for palace stories to their advantage, constantly feeding the media a steady stream of positive charity work and dedicated military service. When scandals hit, they showed absolutely no mercy. From messy 1990s divorces to the severe allegations surrounding Prince Andrew, the objective was always simple: contain the damage and protect the brand. Time and again, the institution proved it would ruthlessly prioritize its own survival over the reputations of individual family members. Those who dared to break script, like Princess Diana, or more recently, Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, were swiftly cast out. This ruthless corporate-style management, perfected by Queen Elizabeth II, is the invisible machinery that keeps this ancient dynasty alive. It remains a massive, multi-generational effort to police their image and direct the narrative, evolving with the modern world, while preserving the ancient rituals that grant them authority. Elizabeth was far more than a mere monarch. She was the long-serving, highly formidable chief executive of the world's most enduring family business. When Queen Elizabeth II passed away in 2022, it marked the end of an era. It plunged the House of Windsor directly into its greatest modern trial. Could an institution so deeply defined by one leader successfully pivot to a successor with a completely different style? The ultimate survival of the Windsor dynasty now rests entirely on the shoulders of the new king and his heirs. But get this, their true power comes from their massive personal wealth. They hold massive private estates outright, including Balmoral and Sandringham, along with priceless art and crown jewels, plus a massive portfolio of private investments kept strictly secret from public eyes. When you add it all up, the total is absolutely mind-boggling. In 2017, financial analysts estimated the total capital value of the monarchy's brand at a whopping £67.5 billion. They also calculated that their yearly contribution to the United Kingdom's economy exceeded £1.7 billion, driven largely by tourism and royal warrants. This staggering economic leverage forms the absolute bedrock of the Windsor strategy. It allows them to operate at a level no other royal family on earth can match. It bankrolls their massive staff and the upkeep of their historic palaces. These grand, glittering spectacles capture the global imagination while shielding the crown from dirty day-to-day politics. Governments rise and fall, yet the royal treasury remains completely untouchable. Historical records reveal a lethal mix of historic land revenues and immense private wealth, combined with a global brand valued in the billions, making the Windsor dynasty a financial superpower. But as we look deeper, we find that survival required far more than just money. It took decades of relentless, highly calculated micromanagement. The mastermind behind this corporate shield was none other than Queen Elizabeth II. Her 70-year reign stands as a masterclass in survival. She forged a family dynamic that ran with the cold precision of a multinational conglomerate. It makes perfect sense why insiders came to call this family the Firm, a title first coined by her husband, Prince Philip. This moniker sums up their entire strategy: a cold, highly pragmatic, and totally unsentimental machine. Their primary commodity remains tradition, security, and the illusion of stability. Senior royals served as the board, while the Queen acted as the ultimate chief executive for 70 years. Her true brilliance lay in recognizing that the crown was now purely symbolic. The symbol had to remain flawless. She carefully projected absolute devotion, wrapped in impenetrable mystery. She rarely sat for interviews, keeping her personal thoughts hidden. In a world of oversharing, her quiet restraint was her greatest weapon. She knew that overexposure breeds contempt, meaning the crown had to keep its distance to stay sacred. Behind closed doors, our research shows they constantly renegotiated their pact with the press, but this came with severe risks. Her 1953 coronation was the very first major event broadcast live on television. Prince Philip championed this gamble, ignoring the warnings of his traditional advisors. The move succeeded, but history reveals not every public relations experiment would end so well. In 1969, trying to seem more human, they opened their doors to a documentary crew for an entire year. The resulting film drew record audiences, but the Queen quickly realized it was a massive disaster. It shattered their grand mystique, reducing them to ordinary people eating breakfast. The archives suggest the footage was locked away, never to be seen again. Think about it. They had to remain visible, but never accessible, always dictating the narrative. After that debacle, their media interactions were ruthlessly controlled. They relied strictly on tightly staged appearances and curated photo opportunities to project the exact image they wanted. They weaponized the endless appetite of the press to their own advantage, regularly feeding reporters a curated diet of wholesome charitable works and heroic military service. But the firm could also be cold. From messy 90s divorces to the dark allegations surrounding Prince Andrew, they faced relentless crises. The goal was always simple: contain the fallout and protect the brand. History proves the ancient institution will always prioritize its own survival, sacrificing any family member to save itself. Rebels who dared to stray from the script, like Princess Diana, or more recently, Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, found themselves utterly cast aside and left out in the cold. This corporate-style machinery, perfected by the Queen, remains the hidden engine keeping this dynasty alive. An endless, cross-generational battle to defend the brand, control the narrative, and adapt to the time, yet preserve the ancient traditions that give this monarchy its power. She was never a mere monarch. She was the formidable, longest-serving leader of the most successful family firm on earth. When Queen Elizabeth II passed away in 2022, an entire era died with her, and it forced the House of Windsor to face its greatest modern test. Could an institution so deeply defined by one woman successfully pivot to a leader with a completely different style? Now, the survival of the dynasty rests on a new king and his heirs.